Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGL codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code, OmniPoke. For today's video, we have the first week of results coming in the Scarlet and Violet format. Now, we only have, well, we have less than 10 days until the EUIC now, so we have the Asian tournament results that we're going to continue to go over. There's actually been more this past weekend, which I still need to talk about, but it looks like the online results are the next best thing to keep on top and keep your finger on the pulse as to what's being played, how these lists are being played, to successful finishes. Now, it's not the be-all and end-all, but this is going to give us a good indication of what the metagame perhaps could be like in terms of popularity of decks, as well as have a sneak peek at what's doing the best. So today we have 8 tournaments to look over. These are all the tournaments that are 64 players and over that we have deck lists for, so hopefully it gives us a good few things to talk about here. And we're starting with the Tournament of Doom. We are going in sequential order, so this was the earliest tournament. And it looked like this is only 4 rounds, so take all of these lists with a pinch of salt. But I think we should just look at the top 4 decks, because they are all 4-0, which is very, very strong records. Because we have so much, I don't want to get bogged down in looking at things over and over and over again. But an Arc Giratina deck was able to win this first event. It has the barrel line. Interestingly, double 70 hit point Bidoof. I think with so much Mirage Gate, there is a debate around playing 60 hit point bench protection Bidoof, just to weave it in against Lost Box. Could even play a split, honestly, but just a minor debate there. Does have Drapion in here to respect Mew, has Radiant Gardevoir to try and be tanky in all sorts of situations, has double Sharon's Care to really give yourself a decent time into Lost Zone Box, which I definitely think is that deck that people might try and target at EUIC, because it is, at the moment, the best earner in terms of like fake championship points. If you correlate all the data from the current Eastern events as well as the online tournaments, Lost Box does come out on top, so it is possibly the deck that people will target, and it's things like this Sharon's Care which is going to be really helpful for this archetype in particular. Also just that high judge count, just a couple copies of Path, but still can be obviously tutored out with Starbirth when needed. Isn't playing one switch, one rope, which is something you often see with Arctina, but just a minor thing there. And is rounding out its energy count with V-Guard. So it has V-Guard and Radguardy. I think both of these in combination try and give you a better time into the Lost Zone variant of Giratina, so that you have multiple ways of staying out of their reach, at least from Lost Impact, of course. They can get you with one Requiem, but hopefully your tanky V-Stars from that point on are doing the job. So yeah, no surprise that Arc comes out, hits the ground running in this format, because we know it's a very quantified archetype. We already know all about it. So not overly surprising to see it performing well. The first Miraidon deck to look at is actually a Miraidon Flying Pikachu deck that has a 2/2 Flaffy to help continue accelerate, as well as your generators, and actually plays an Espeon VMAX package, trying to create this frustrating wall in combination with the Flying Pikachu, right? The Max Balloon says basics can't hit you, and then you have the Espeon to remove the effects of attacks, so now you protect yourself from Sableye Sprinkle on the Flying Peak. So again, this is another way that this deck in particular has attempted to have a good time into Lost Zone variants, which seems very important, and also you protect yourself from Star Requiem as well by having the Espeon. The one worry I think about Espeon VMAX is that there are a lot of Lost Zone decks that do play Gate and Drapion in their list. They can try and create this combo where they gust up the Espeon and deal with it, and that could be a big uptrade for them, especially if they play things like Sky Seal Stone. It can get dicey, but you're still making them have that big combo. I feel like if I wanted to lean into an archetype like this, I'd want a higher judge count, so I stop combinations and just say that, like, I'm putting you on a clock, I'm hitting the Max Balloon button every turn, and I'm waiting for you to find your answer whilst I throw more disruption at you. But this is definitely an interesting approach. You have this annoying walling Pokemon, which is strong into Lugia and Lost Zone Box, especially when you have the Espeon falling back with you. And then you have the pace setting of Miraidon and Raichu to give you higher damage output when you have Flaffy at your disposal. So not really something that I've seen replicated too much in the other tournaments, and not really a deck that I've really seen much in Japan either, but very cool to see that there's new innovation coming in this format, and there is even 2 different Seal Stones. It is playing 2 Arvans, so it can cherry pick the one it wants. I suppose, which I think is very cool. So yeah, Flying Peak still seems to be a really good card. We could see this in even more usual Miraidon builds, like a 1/1 line alongside like your Reggie, Alekis and such. I think that's not too surprising. I could definitely foresee it being a decent card. And even some Arctinas could be playing Flying Peak, so it's still going to be a factor in the format. We have our first Lost Zone box from Mysterious Player, who's someone I know very well, and has got a mini Mirage Gates package going on with a Charizard variant. So typically, the differential between Charizard and Greninja is that Greninja leans way heavier into having a really high energy count, and then Mirage Gates to try and sort of supplement that. Whereas this build is saying, I've got a couple Gates in here and a couple Raihan, and hopefully that's enough for me to use Charizard, Snorlax, and actually the Delphox V. We've seen this alongside an Arceus deck before, actually, with that 120-120 option. This has basically just been outclassed by Raikou in the previous set, you know, like pre-rotation. Amazing Rare Raikou, but actually this does the exact same thing. It is on a 2-prizer and does force you to Lost Zone cards, so it's a pricey option, but it can, you know, do 2 hits and can allow the Charizard deck actually to threaten down Manaphy and punish those players that don't respect it, possibly. I even think this card could be stronger in an unknown field. I feel like in open deck list this gets worse, but if your opponent sees Fire Energy, I know whenever I've played against Lost Box and seen Fire Energy, I go, right, I don't need Manaphy this game. And Delphox could definitely punish that approach, which I think is interesting. Roxanne, I feel, is quite strange in a Charizard build, because typically you're trying to do the Roxanne play so that you can knock out Manaphy on the same turn and then do the double snipe. But maybe it's, again, the Delphox does a very similar role here. Typically, I feel like my late game with Zard involves Clara and Raihan way more often, though. So that's just a small note there. Outside of that, a pretty nice straightforward Charizard with a lot of switch outs, right? It's playing 2 switch as well as the 4 cart, 4 rope, so giving you a ton of those options. Sometimes you see things like Lost Vacuum in these slots just to give you more bounces to path because of Drapion and Zard. And sometimes the Lost Vacuum helps you get to 10 in the mirror that bit quicker, so a small debate there, but yeah, really interesting innovation from MP there. And then the final list to look at is Guardy from this first tournament, and it's going to be the Guardy that we have seen from Aichi, the second place list. I believe this is the exact 60. Off the top of my head, it looks very similar. Possibly just flip-flopping fog and level counts. Those are the only things that I think are different. But yeah, it's a very cheeky supporter line, for sure. Actually, this is slightly different, because this doesn't play Palpad, right? I think sometimes we see Palpad in these lists. But yeah, it's that similar shell that we've seen, where it has the Mirage Step option, it has the very high count of the Shining Arcana, it has the Jelly Crest combo to at least give you some amount of play into Lost Zone variants. You have Sky Seal Zacian for a ton of catch-up plays, and you're just trying to draw good. Even though you are playing like judges and stuff, you're trying to make it difficult for a Lost Zone player to create massive combos against you, and maybe sometimes they lose a ton of tempo, and that's part of your catch-up mechanic, I suppose. I do always look at the supporter line and think, man, this is worrying, but the deck has Mew, Greninja, and a ton of refinements and Arcanas at its disposal, so it does end up drawing a ton of cards. So it seems to be working over and over again, so I can't really question it too much. Rounding out the top 8, this is literally just on resistance, though, so don't take it too much to heart, although these were still pretty solid records to at least begin a tournament with. Another Arctina, another Lost Zone box, another Arctina, and another Guardy. So yeah, a real good start for the Arc decks, as well as Lost Zone box and Guardy, actually doing well in the opening stages. On to the Trainer Academy tournament. This was one with an 8-1 record with Rapid Strike Urshifu Inteleon, which is really interesting to see, because this deck is trying to certainly punish the prevalence of Lost Zone. I think everyone is expecting Lost Zone box and Giratina and Gudra and all these other variants to make up possibly even as high as like 40% of the EUIC, honestly. It's been touted so heavily above most other decks to be just like the strongest choice. So with that in mind, this is one of the archetypes that has certainly one of the best Lost Zone matchups, because you have the double gunner option with your VMAX to try and ping down these lower hit point Pokemon. Conf is, essentially your opponent can't play around this in any way if they want to actually play the game as a Lost Zone player. So gunning these down and using Radiant Alakazam and Medicham to Yoga Loop and get additional turns is incredible. In particular, if you can Yoga Loop their Manaphy, it then leads you into your second turn to do a Gmax Rapid Flow, part of the reason why you see the Urshifu, but also it gives you type coverage into Arc players and Miraidon players. So yeah, certainly a strong card. And we have the double Drapion in here. Surprisingly, your Mew matchup is really, really good. You're only really worried about Guardy as like a Psychic deck, I suppose. But even then, if you go first into Guardy and get Gunning quickly, you can still even make that awkward for them, especially with early Rapid Flow threat as well. There's a lot of things that you can do into the Psychic matchups. The double Drap, especially because you have Octillery tutoring Stadium, you have really good access to bounce like Roxanne Parr from the opponent, because Octillery gives you immediate bounce. So all you need to find is a Bull Search. So yeah, that's part of the reason why Drapion is so solid in here. I think my biggest question mark with this deck is just the draw. That's the thing that scares me most whenever I have played this deck, because it can be all singing, all dancing at times, if you've drawn well off like your initial research or whatnot, or even just have research in hand. But then there are those games where you don't quite have those good supporters, or you don't quite get as much Bull Search going in the opening stages, and the deck really does kind of fizzle, it seems. So I would really like to see a more streamlined approach to the support account, because it feels so important to just like not whiff research turn by turn, because you need so many things every turn. You need to have multiple waters and just not miss these throughout the entire game, as well as your like Rapid Strike searching to help you out here and there. I also really like VIP Pass just anecdotally from this deck, because you want to develop Remoraid, multiple Inteleon, and you want to threaten Urshifu very early on. And also, like, you always need to find Alakazam at some point, you always need to find Medicham at some point. Obviously, Octillery can find this piece, but yeah, I really personally like VIP, because this is one of the highest maintenance decks in the format, so I would really like to see it go wide build. But we've seen the precedents be shown here that a Urshifu Intel can be strong. Now let's start having a look at a ton of these different Lost Box variants. It feels like Skyseal Stone has continued to be the best performer. It's been the best performer in the IRL tournaments so far, and it seems to be the most popular in most of these online events in the top 8 placements. And this is where you're playing Raikou, Drap, Zap, and Stone to give yourself a ton of type coverages to uptrade into V-Star and V-Max Pokemon, of course. And then you have the core of Sable Cram. In this case, it's Greninja Lax. Typically, it's like Greninja. Sometimes Lax comes in, sometimes not. And it's playing the Quad Gate. So this gives you a good amount of 1-prize threats, a good amount of 2-prize threats. And then you have that core of just having lots of switch outs, as well as the beach courts. You have Clara for a ton of recycle. This list is playing Rox and Boss. Like I said, it's Greninja Gate builds that I think make the most sense to play Roxanne in, because you can go for sprinkle their Manaphy plus Roxanne, and then next turn if the opponent can't develop Manaphy, essentially if they can't play a Clara, you immediately get a 2-prize turn with Shuriken in almost every instance. And even if they can redevelop their Manaphy, you can make it more awkward for them to like do anything else on that turn, I suppose, because you're putting them to such a low hand size. I also really like the nod of double Manaphy. I could foresee this being a real strong play going into the EUIC, giving some respect to the mirror, because in many instances, if Manaphy is dealt with by the opponent, you're forced into Clara if you only play 1 copy. But if you play 2, of course, it means you can continue to play other supporter cards, which is obviously really important, and it gives you a bit of peace of mind from prizing and such. Even though you do play Hisuian, in many instances, you need this down turn 1 if you're respecting the mirror match going second. So, yeah, I think double Manaphy is strong in the lists that can afford to do it. Mainly, I like it in this one because it's one of the more spacious builds, and I also like it in Charizard build, actually. I really like double Manaphy. The one thing I'd say about this list is that it has no Pokegears, and I've really enjoyed Pokegear in these Lost Zone variants, again, because it really comes down to getting to 10 as quickly as possible to unlock that Sableye door, and just not missing a beat throughout the game. So I really like Gears personally, even if it is just a 1 or 2 count. That would be what I would try and work into this list. But honestly, this is a really, really good base to take from. I think this is a very well-made 60. And also had a very good record, so yeah. Next up, we have another Skyseal Stone. So this one actually is doing what I've mentioned. It's slightly more streamlined in terms of Pokemon, just playing the 1 Manaphy. It is very high on the Sableye, but isn't playing anything like that Snorlax. It's playing the triple Pokegear though, so it's really trying to lean into that a lot more. Also has the Raihan presence, which I didn't think was in the last list. So Raihan also gives you extra ways to find that Skyseal Stone, which is obviously very helpful. Surprisingly, it's only playing 3 Rope. I think 4 is just a pretty well respected number because we just need to have really high switch outs. But yeah, I don't mind just flip-flopping a gear and then rocking this list either. That also seems very reasonable. I've already talked to death about the Skyseal Stone package though. Another Urshi making it into top 4. This is a build that I think is way more similar to what I like in the list, because it's playing the quad research, it's playing quad VIP, and it's actually playing quad forest seal stone. Now, I wouldn't quite go that far because you do get diminishing returns, but I really like the emphasis on I want to research, I want to VIP, get my guys out the deck so that I can just draw through more smoothly. I think this is much closer to where I want to be with the list. It is playing double Cheryl to give you some free turns. Obviously, you have the synergy with Inteleon as well as Urshifu, because they can both be efficient attackers, and Intel brings energy back to hand. So this is another way that the deck can buy turns whilst you're trying to work towards your combo and actually just get more attacks in with Gmax Spiral to two-shot through things is definitely fine. So that's the other innovation here. It's clear to see that Forest Seal Stone is like... There's too many of them in this list. Like, I think that's pretty clear because we know how diminishing these get. And having 4 VIP and 4 Forest gives you a lot of cards that just do nothing after their first use, essentially. So I do worry a little bit about that. But I love the intention of this list, saying, I want a VIP game, I want to research. Even having Irida, giving yourself extra access to VIP is obviously very solid. So yeah, take that what you will. The 1 Melanie's a little bit sus, because I do think it's still important. Even when you are doing Yoga Loop turns, it gives you more plays with your Urshi. I think 2 is mostly for peace of mind and for access when you need it. So I understand the 1 copy, but also a little bit worrying there. We move on to our next Lost Box. And this is the Turbo build. So this is one of the other main approaches of this 60, where we sort of forego quite as many type coverages. Like, we still have Drapion, we still have Raikou, but we don't have that massive uptrade potential of the Sky Seal Stone. Instead, we have the pace of Dragonite that can just burst a 250 attack very early. And we also have Pidgeot as well, possibly, which can be a decent mirror card, because you can search this guy out early with VIP, and then you can get your Forest Seal Stone activation, then you can jump back into the deck, or you can just leave it in play in the opening stages in mirror, and then actually block your opponent's use of Escape Rope, because you can rope into Pidgeot, then move it out the active the following turn after it sponges like a cram hit, and they've lost a turn, basically. So Pidgeot's actually pretty cool for that play, which I think is... It's probably not that niche, because there's so many lost mirrors. It could actually be a mirror differential, but you're already trying to race that mirror, because you're playing Forest Seal Stone and Lost Vacuum. So you can try and get to that 7. It does require a bit of a high roll, but you can get to that 7 going second on your first turn with the help of Chorus, Selects, and most importantly, Vacuums. So you can get early Shurikens and early Dragonite or whatnot just to tempo out on people. I do think this is likely to be favoured into the Sky Seal Stone build, which has been the most popular. So I think that's definitely worth considering. I obviously fear for the 1 copy of Cram, but it's a statement made by this player to play double Manaphy over double Cram. I personally wouldn't do that, but I also wouldn't mind playing 2 of each. You know what I mean? I think that's also very valid. Also playing the Collapse Stadium, so it has the Pidgeot option and the Collapsed option to give you different ways of removing damage from play, which I think is pretty interesting. Yeah, pretty nice list, honestly. Collapse could be another way that you can buy space as well, because you can do a Collapse combo with Vacuum to open up a board space for you, which actually is quite viable when you work in towards the late game in the Lost Mirror, when you want to, like, you've used all your comp phase and you just want them off the board because they're not helpful to you anymore. So I think that's kind of nice. We have yet another Urshi Intel, so this really has taken everyone by storm. This list has... It's cards like this, like Echoing Horn in this list, and like Judge and the Clara. I feel like these cards are way too Dreamer. Like, you have to draw these at the perfect time for them to make sense, when they could just be extra researchers and VIPs just to get into the game. I feel like this deck honestly has a good enough game plan into most of the formats that you just want to make it draw as well as possible. So yeah, we have our first Miraidon Alecki, and this list is playing a couple Klefki in here to try and support it. It's got the Arvans in here for the selection of tools. Honestly, it's a pretty cookie-cutter build of Miraidon Alecki. Nothing too surprising here going in. I guess the Zapdos is technically like a surprising card. It's just a way of getting an instant burst of 10 damage, which can sometimes be relevant in the opening stages. But yeah, I like the supporter line a lot. Raihan is like in and out of these builds, but it's a classic. Like if you find it at the right time, it's obviously a great card for you, and adds to your overall support count, which I'm kind of a fan of. Yeah, so this is one of the more straightforward builds of Miraidon that we've come to expect so far in the format. And then we also have another Lost Zone box. This is... Okay, so it is a Skyseal Stone build, but it's not quite the full suite of attackers. It's just the Drapion Raikou, so it's foregoing Zapdos. And it has 2 1-prize threats in Snorlax and Zamazenta. So Zamazenta does take up an energy slot, and that's part of the reason why it's in instead of Zapdos rather than as well as, because this one also requires 2 metal energy, so it definitely requires you to commit more down towards it. But the idea is you have more mid-range, bulky 1-prizes, so when you're not hitting for type coverage, you still have things that can go through other bulky single prizes, or just like evolving 2 prizes from the opponent. Even into V-Stars, hitting that 220 sets you up for Sableye players or Greninja players on the following turn quite nicely. This is another list playing just 1 Cram. I always fear for it. I know a lot of Japanese 60s have tried to make that space, but I'm always just a little bit headachy about it because I feel like Mirror is something you have to respect, so I would probably always play 2 copies. And again, just locking yourself into an early Clara or something would also just feel so rough. But yeah, this one's also not playing any gears, but I think this list requires more energy just to make the Zama work. We move on to... So yeah, this was really the story of Urshi being absolutely insane, and then Lost Zone box also proving itself, really, in this one. There was a Guardian 9th, just saying, but yeah. We move on to Pumpkin Amy's free 1K tournament, and it was Lost Box Finals, so strap yourselves in for more Lost Box. This time, it's again Skyseal. Like I keep saying, it's one of the more popular ones. It is foregoing the Raikou option, though, to play Celebrations Yveltal, and we have seen this a little bit before, actually. And the idea behind this card is you try and, against Lugia in particular, you try to use your Greninja and Sableye to deal with both of their Archeops, and then once Archeops have been dealt with, you bring in the Yveltal and just start using Cry of Destruction, and the opponent has no way to power up their really expensive attackers. They literally have nothing cheap that deals with Yveltal, so you can just start screeching away their board, essentially, is the idea, and you just run them out of resources. So that's kind of the intention of this Yveltal, which I think is kind of cool, and it seems like this player's opted for it over having a different energy type in here and Raikou at the same time, which seems to be okay. It does give you 1 less option against Flying Pikachu, but even then it's a big combo to deal with Flying Peak, because you need to have Rope Boss and Raikou Gate all in 1 turn, so I guess that's not a huge loss, really. Double Manaphy, double Cram. Really like this. I think double Manaphy is really catching on, and it makes a ton of sense why, because again, it's all about respect for Mirror. Ultra Ball as a one-off is actually a card that I think is really not that bad. This one is obviously playing Luminion to try and make it that little bit better. But also just having a card in your deck that can deal with VIP passes when they make their way into your hand just from like drawing for turn or from prize cards or just from getting judged into it. Having this tiny bit of like 1 card hand thinning is actually kind of viable. I think it's okay. And it gives you a search for Horlucha as well, which I think is kind of neat. I definitely like playing 1 in my Giratina at the moment, and I found myself using it just to get rid of like excess nest balls and VIPs like all the time, and just felt that that was a good enough effect just so that I'm more Roxanne proof. So a minor thing there. Pretty cool to see. Then we have a Charizard variant doing quite well. This is another really intriguing list. So this is very heavy on the Sable Cram, very heavy on Clara, and even has Palpad, but is playing Pokestop, right? So it's on high counts of Clara so that you're allowed to Pokestop, and it's allowed to get rid of Claras and you not be put into that bad of a situation. It's got the Lizard, but it's actually got Miltank, and Miltank is an interesting card in the format. It forces, like, even decks that have answers, it forces them into weird positions. Like, I feel against Arc decks, forcing, like, a Giratina V into the active that can just shred through this is really good, because it's such a low hit point V that then you can maybe mop up with Zard. Against, like, Miraidon, it stops them using Regieleki to hit and run, or to use Lightning Wall. It forces them to use a Miraidon itself, which is obviously way weaker. And this is a card you can use against Klefki strategies, because you can route through Klefkis just with 2 turn attachments, and obviously they're colorless attachments, so even if you're not going crazy with your flower selectings, you can work towards a Miltank and just pressurize them with route if it's up against like Shadow Rider, or if it's up against even Guardian Klefki or something like that. It's going to be a card that sets that tempo. So I feel like this is like serving enough purposes that it could be reasonable, specifically in the Charizard variant. I think for like Greninja variants, just attaching to Greninja is good enough, or attaching to your V Pokemon is good enough. But the Zard build doesn't have that sort of early game threat to deal with keys, and I think Miltank actually could be your better answer there. So that's kind of interesting. This is again very high on the Switch cards. It's got Quad, Rope, Cart, Switch, Gear, and Vacuum. So this deck is definitely getting to 10 before you, and that's partly why it's such a high Sableye, to be honest. So yeah, the Pokestops. I've played Pokestops before in a Rad Charizard. This is many moons ago now, when Silver Tempest format was just beginning, and I did really love Pokestops, honestly. So cool to see this approach come back. But yes, of course, it has to play a super high switch count because you're subbing out Beach Courts. So that's part of that reason. I wouldn't mind seeing a split of Beach Court Pokestop, honestly. But yeah, it seems to be doing well. Very cool build of the Charizard list there. We have our first Giratina. Is this our first Giratina Lost Box? Yeah, looks like it. This one is incorporating 3 different stadiums, which is kind of spicy. Also has V-Guard Energy in here as well, which you don't often see. And it's even playing the Thornton. We haven't seen this one for a while. Especially without Luminion, I think Thornton is way more random and difficult to weave in. But it does give you Pokemon Recovery, so it can give you a way back into like another Sableye or back-to-back Greninja, which I think is kind of funky. Or back-to-back Drapion as well, I suppose. Oftentimes you see Clara in this slot, but this list isn't even playing Manaphy, which I think is kind of strange. I feel like Manaphy is still really good in Giratina. But hey-ho. What else we got cooking in here? Nothing too crazy. It's okay on the switch outs. It's got the gears, just so that you're not whiffing your Colruses, which is fine. Yeah, I think really the Thornton is that sort of question mark card, and the split of stadiums. Obviously, they have different value in different situations. Sometimes you try and Sinnoh and tank with your Tina and really hang on tight against like Lugia and stuff. Speaking of which, we have a Lugia. Single Strike seems to be the way to go. Most of the results indicate that. Pretty okay with a supporter lineup. Seems good to me. Really like the ball search as well. Having great balls in here as well gives you extra percentages. Only one Mesagoza. Now I've had a torrid time testing Mesagoza on the ladder. I've had hideous ratios, but I still feel like this card is like possibly good enough. And even just having a 4th copy seems okay, especially when this list plays no Pump Kaboo. I think an extra stadium gives me some peace of mind. I'm pretty okay with the energy lineup. I definitely like playing Impact as well as for Single Strike. I think the one Lucky is a bit random. It could just be an extra gift, honestly. But then I really like the energy. If Lucky is gift, I'm ecstatic with that energy count. It's how I would load out my attachments. The Yveltal adds an additional 1 prize threat, and obviously can uptrade into Guardian Mew because you have the damage buff with Single Strike energy. Dunsparce isn't all that common because it's so squishy, but obviously it can give you some percentage into Miraidon. In my testing already, though, I've found that Lugia is pretty favoured into Miraidon just by having Stonjourner, honestly. So I think that's not really a card you necessarily need, unless you're mostly worried about Skyseal Stone Raikos. That would be the only other reason. But then you're giving Lost Box an easy, squishy, low hit point Mon for them to knock out, plus then set up damage on other things, which is a little bit counterintuitive. I guess it lets you judge them more, and like if they have that combo, they have to first go through a Dunsparce, but still a little bit random there, I think. We see a Guardi. This is, again, that traditional list. This is, I think this is actually the exact 60 that I was talking about earlier, the Aichi list, because I'm seeing the Arv and I'm seeing the Power Pad. Yeah, this is that same 60. I keep saying it on all my videos, but just in case anyone has just tuned in for the first time, I do think that Champions Festival is worth it in Guardi. And for anyone thinking like, oh, all the successful lists have been playing this split, yes, that's kind of true. But also, Champs Festival is almost $1,000 in Japan. So there's a reason why people aren't playing those stadiums. And I think they're still expensive. But as a European, we get to play European languages. So Champs Festival is actually quite cheap to play. And I think it is a good enough, like it's a big enough upgrade to be worth the money, in my opinion, to play Guardi. Because it just makes your Shining Arcana that much more powerful at uptrading into V-Stars. And I think that's just valid. So yeah, I'll keep saying it. I'll keep saying it until I start seeing Champs Festival success. We have our first Mew. This is a Judge Path Mew with DTEs, of course. It's got Fan of Waves. That's a really interesting one. I wonder what Fan of Waves is in here for in particular. I'm not too sure on that one, honestly. What are you trying to fan? Mirror? No. Yeah, I'm not. The Fan of Waves is a bit of an outlier card. The rest of the list I really like. Just turn this into a trekking shoe or something. Or a Lost City. Playing no Lost City is also very scary, I think, because the amount of Lost Zone decks that play Drap and now like multiple Clara and multiple Gear sometimes, you have to Lost Zone a Tina on sight. You're not allowed to Path Judge or Path Rocks and hope they miss Clara. I just don't think that's reliable enough. I think you have to zone them now. More Guardies rounding out top 8, so doing really well. This list, again, very similar to that Japanese 60, has the Miriam in here, has 2 Wiglets. So this is this is a hilarious thing. Seeing 2 Wiglets come into the deck is just like, obviously it's a troll from someone, but they've still done well enough with this deck, which tells you that like everything else is core to the 60, and then these 2 Wiglets could be any other card in the deck. I feel like you should play a second Shining Arcana, and then I feel like you could play, what should we play? 3rd Candy, 3rd Ultra? Something like that, even just an extra supporter card, like 3rd Judge or something. I think it's pretty hilarious that a double Wiglet deck made top 8. It shows you how powerful Guardi is, that it can choose to play 2 troll cards just to make it into a video, which seems to have worked like a treat. But there you go. It tells you what the core 58 cards are of the deck, at least. And then once again, we see a Jelly build doing pretty well. This one's also weaving in the Choice Belt. Only 1 Stadium, 1 Worker, 1 Pal Pad, so that's a little bit risky. It's playing Gallade as an additional potential 1 prize attacker, with that Buddy Catch option for the different supporters that you have access to, I suppose. But yeah, we're seeing a decent amount of Guardies make it. And interestingly, as we go further towards the other results, there'll be a completely different build of Guardi that's also being successful. But this tournament has Lost Box doing well, Tina doing well for the first time, Lugia Mute, but then 3 Guardies. So yeah, lots of Guardi doing well. As we get towards the 2 late night tournaments, that's when I'll look at the metagame for those, because those are the largest events that we've had so far. We move into Sunny Games weekly, and we have an Urshi doing well once again. And this looks like a copy-paste of one of the ones we've already seen before. Nothing too new about this one. I've pretty much made my stance on the Urshi that I just want to simplify it even more than what I've seen so far. We have a Sky Seal with Snore Zam, which is looking pretty good. This one's actually playing Cancelling Cologne as well. This is a way of getting around Klefki, I suppose. Not too sure on that one. I feel like you can just turn attached to your stuff and be fine against Klefki in these builds. But obviously, if it lets you draw cards and get out of the lock, it's okay. Haven't seen Arctina for a little bit, but it has made top 4 in this one. Again, this looks very similar to the last one that we've seen. I think it's actually the same 60. Doing well, so props to that list. Doing good. We have a Lost Tina in top 4. This one is also playing that Thornton. Also, just a real quick note. I really like 4 water, 3 grass. I think that's my favourite split of energy, especially when you choose to play double recycler, because I feel like the speed of a Greninja and just like having access to Greninja very often throughout the game, whenever you can pounce on your opponent, I think that's actually massive. So I low-key like Grass being your lowest count of energy, because Psychic has the upside for Sableye, Water has the upside for Greninja, Grass is only for Tina, and that's always going to be like a gate play. So having 3, especially with the double recycler, I think is completely fine. That's just a small thing, but it's how I think it should be going forward. We have a Zard Lost Box with a ton of Stadium cards, playing Sinnoh and Path. 1 Path. So cheesy. It might make people play differently. I guess in open deck list it makes people play differently, which is kind of funny. Very high on the Sable counts, really trying to lean into that boy, which is fine. The double Manaphy I really like as well. Very high on the switch cards. Look at this. 4 switch card, 4 rope, 4 switch. You're just not missing. And, oh wow, this list is playing no VIP. Oh, no, well, okay, I'm blind. I was like, wait, no VIP, that makes no sense. But no, it's really high on ball search as well. So 2 Fog, 2 Nest, and 2 Level Ball. Level Ball gives you earlier access to Hawlucha, which is very powerful. Okay, so this list is playing no Raihan. So it's like really waiting until the very end stages for Zard, but is trying to go from 4 straight to 10. It's going, okay, I'll get my early Confe usage, and then from there I'll definitely pulver into Sableye from that point on, and I'll wait around for the Lizard. Sometimes you see some Raihan in here, sometimes you even see like 1 Gate or 1 DTE, but this time it's like really leaning heavily into I just want to Sableye. And that could be the best way to go going into EUIC once again, because Mirror is so important. So just get to 10 faster than everyone else is a very good strategy. We have lots more Urshifu Intel, 3 more in top 8. I feel like we've covered most of them now, but well done to Urshi Intel. It really has been doing so well in these online tournaments, much outperforming how it's done in the IRL events so far. 4 of them in this top 8, that's absolutely insane. We move on to Hoarder's Casual, and it was won by a Lugia that went 7-0, very solid. This list is playing Radiant Jirachi over Radiant Serena. It plays Drapion as well. I'm really anti-Drapion, because you could just play a Yveltal and it's just a more well-rounded card that's good for you. Just a small note there. I'm surprised that it plays Jirachi but only 2 Double Turbo. I feel like you'd want at least a 3rd copy of DTE so you could like pay retreat out of Lugia into this card that little bit more often. Or just use its attack if you've gone first in high roll to start with it. This one is also playing Towers rather than Mezagozas. I think almost all the lists that I've seen do well in real tournaments have been Mezagoza based, but Tower is still an option, and this is quite high on the single strike cards. That's another reason why Yveltal would be better than Drapion as well, because you'd have an extra Tower target. But this is high on the urns. It's also playing Regenerative Energy, which can have some high roll. I'm a little bit soft on these, but and this list actually plays no Nest Ball either. Nest Ball is still super important, I think, for Lugia. Yeah, no Mezagoza, no Nest Ball. That's really greedy at having so few outs to turn 1 Lugia V. I feel like Nest Balls are still mandatory for this deck, because it's not only Lugia V outs, but also just like finding your T-Tar or Stone or whatever else on the turn you need it is really important. So I think there's some choice cuts in this list that need to be made to just have a more consistent build. But hey, it went 7-0. We have more Urshis, which we'll look at the second place list just in case it's any difference. Yeah, so this one's also VIP based. This one is much more streamlined with that support account. This is literally what I've been begging for. I just want a more streamlined supporter. All of the things are obvious reasons why they're in here, right? These all obviously research deepest dig into the deck. Focus can be tutored by Octillery. Irida gets you access to VIP and your evolutions. Melanie is so you can pop off with Urshi turn by turn. This is the supporter line that I'm really hoping for. I want to see a 4th research in one of these builds at some point, but this is definitely what I've been begging for. A more streamlined support account, a more streamlined ball search count, just get into the game Urshifu. So I'm really happy to see this one, actually. Very nice list. We have a Miraidon in top 4. This is again that Klefki list with the 1 zap. Very similar to what we've seen before. Another Lugia. Doing pretty well. This one does have that Yveltal. Also playing that Dunsparce. I'm still very cold on Dunsparce myself. This one is playing Towers, though. Triple Urn Tower seems to be a bit of a wave right now in some of the lists. We see our first Lost Gudra in top 8. I'm actually touting this to be quite good for EOIC, personally. This one is wild. So many strange energies going on. So it has the Raikou Skyseal option, and it has Sableye. I've no idea why you would play Gudra and then not want to Moisture Star. Moisture Star sounds it's like one of the key selling points of playing Gudra is that you're big and then you get a free turn by being too big and moisting and being big again. I'm stunned that this plays Skyseal Stone. I suppose you think you're weak enough into Mew that you want Skyseal. Possibly that's the justification. But you don't need the Raikou, for sure. I kind of like Sableye for helping you mop up stuff, because Rolling Iron is actually a really annoying number into, like, Miraidon players. Even T-Tar in Lugia decks, they can play, like, V-Guard and stuff and stay out of range of Choice Belt, so having Sableye to mop stuff is kind of nice. You already have Greninja that can do some moppage, But this can be a decent option. I feel like this has slightly too much going on, but I definitely really like Losku, so... And I do see the justification for Drap Skyseal because it's important for the Mew matchup. And actually we have a DTE Mew here. It's playing Drap itself. It's become the very thing it's swore to destroy. It's playing Cleansing Gloves as well. Is this so you have better time Psychic Leaping into stuff? If so, that's actually kind of cool. And I guess it helps you reach on Guardi EX. This is actually way cuter than I thought when I first saw it. That's actually like low-key kind of intelligent over second choice spell. I can see it being good over second choice spell because the things you need to reach on are Mirror and Guardi EX, really. And this gives you upside into Psychic Leap plays against like Lost Box and stuff. Actually, kind of Galaxy Brain. Really like that. The Arven one of kind of cute as well. Yeah, really very cool list. The Cleansing Gloves, I'm on board. Let's go. Let's get it. Finally, we have a Lost Zone in top 8. This is... Okay, interesting. So it's Skyseal, but it plays Dragonite. Typically, you only see Dragonite in the turbo builds. But this is having this Dragon Gale option just as a catch-all. I'm big damage. Maybe I sprinkle something in the opening and just get there with it. This is really low on the Pokemon count. 1 Cram, 1 Sable, 1 Zard. So trying all sorts in here. Just seeing what's best. Definitely puts a lot of pressure on your Claras. Definitely puts pressure on your Claras. This has Power Pad at least, but yeah, a little bit scary there. Has Echoing Horn in here as well. I think this is one of the more scattered lists that we've seen so far, where it's just sort of trying everything and something will stick. We move on to the Late Night. So these are the 2 biggest tournaments. Late Night 87 and 88 are multiple hundreds of players. So we'll start by looking at the metagame for these tournaments, because I think these are the best indication of what we could expect, because these are kind of like the most prestigious and just the most players. And it's already at least a couple days in to people playtesting at this point on the ladder, so hopefully people are starting to get an idea of, like, if they are attending EUIC, what they actually want to test and play. So it looks like Lost Zone Box was almost 24%. Then Gardevoir was quite popular. We have Miraidon still being popular, Mew, Lugia, Giratina all the way down at 8%. I'm surprised at how low Urshi Intel's percentage has been for how good it's been in the opening tournaments. And then we have some other interesting stuff. Goo all the way down here. Guardi Mewtwo. We'll see more of this in a moment. So yeah, some interesting stuff going on. But let's have a look at the standings. So Guardi Mewtwo was very low played, but made both top 4 placements. Let's quickly look at some Lugias first. And see where those are lining up. This is a really good list, I think. I do think Collapse is mandatory for Lost Box, though. So I think you need to play 1 Collapsed to have a good time there. I also don't see why you wouldn't just play 1 Serena over 3rd Boss, because it's an extra discard card just for consistency. Outside of that, all pretty good going on in this list. Yeah, I do think it's mandatory to play Collapse, though, if you respect Lost Zone Box. But this went 14-1-2. Really, really good record. And then the other Lugia went 13-3-1. Insane. Yeah, so this one is much higher on stadiums, right? This plays the double collapsed. So that's the 2. We've seen 1 with 0, 1 with 2. Some people will split down the middle and just play 1 copy. But if you really respect Lost Box, I think this is a really important card in the deck, because you often need to Luminion in the opening stages, so wiping those off the board is really important. And if you get early hits in with Lugia and Tank, you also want to wipe those off the board, because we know there's Raikou Seal combos where they can catch up on you. So I think it's really important to play Collapsed in Lugia, and then you just represent as many 1 prizes as possible. Surprisingly, this only plays one prize attacker. It's not playing the Yveltal. Again, it's playing that Drapion, which I'm again, still not too on board with. It does force you to find another stadium bounce, but at least this has a lot of stadium bounces to try and make that happen. It's playing the Impact, which I like. The Luckies, I think Lucky is best just split between V-Guards and Gifts. I think they just have way higher upside. So I'm off the Lucky train. And this one's actually flip-flopping the Boss and Serena count. Sometimes you see 2 Boss, 1 Serena, but this was just having those higher discard synergy outs in the deck, which I certainly respect as well. Looking good. We have the Guardy Mewtwo then. So this is something that we haven't talked about yet. And it made 2 top 4 placements. So the idea around the Guardy package in general is that you're taking out the Jelly Cress package, so you really don't lose much space. You have to play these 4, and you have to play Peonia, but Peonia goes in the space of Hisui and Heavy Ball anyway, because it gives you some access to prize checking. So in terms of consistency cards, you don't lose out on a lot, honestly. You also take out Candy, and just say that you're going to go refining through the deck anyway and just sort of set up more slowly and work towards Mewtwo. And I looked at the data behind the Guardy Mewtwo and regular Guardy so far, and the Guardy Mewtwo has a substantially better time into Lost Zone box. Now, it's still negative. It's still a minus 50% matchup, but the Mewtwo does give you a better time into Lost Zone box. I think the idea is you make your Mewtwo on the turn you play Roxanne so that they can't Drapion gate kill you. And then you're just sprinkling counters over 2 turns and catching up on whatever prize deficit that you've had in the opening stages. I think that's the whole plan. So, interestingly enough, this is way less space invasive, yes, that I thought it was going to be. It looks really bad, like these are 4 cards that could just be consistency cards, right? But no, because regular Guardy has to play Jelly Cress just to have a chance into Lost Zone box as the regular build. So you really don't lose out on much space. And also, these builds are playing Research. That's another key differential. So most of the other Guardies are playing Heavy Judge and then draw 3 supporters like Workers and Miriams and all this other stuff. This build is I want to Research Yeet everything as quickly as possible. Just get into the game more. Because I know that I have the catch-up of Mewtwo and it gives me extra synergy. So yeah, the Mewtwo Guardy is really not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I have tested Mewtwo Guardy before, but I mostly tested against Tina, where it felt really bad. But against Lost Box, it might actually be the right way to go, because I do think you gain 11% or something similar to that in terms of exactly that matchup, which I think is interesting. This build, again, it actually has the Cook, which is another card you can play with the Mewtwo, because, of course, you damage with Psychic Embrace your Mewtwo. So if you play a Cook, you can get out of range of things like Radiant Charizard, which is actually very relevant. This one's playing Defiance Band as well, so you can 330 things with, what's it called, Final Burn. So a few small differences here. But essentially, you try and Roxanne Mewtwo someone and say, deal with this. That's kind of the idea of this build, and I think it's very powerful, honestly. We also see Shadow Rider, which we haven't talked about yet either. So Shadow Rider is trying to slow the game down with Mischievous Lock, and also has Hatterene V, which has a hit-and-run attack, 80 and switch. 80 is actually a pretty decent number, right, because it deals with Comphase and such, and your overall goal is working towards your Shadow Riders, so even just that 80 poke can then get you in range of a Max Geist earlier, which I think is pretty valuable. So this seems to be one of the better Klefki users in the game, just because you have so much access to Psychic Mons, obviously Klefki being one of them, and you have the means and the need to play high switch count anyway, just so you move in between your guys. You have the Shadow Mist option to stop special in stadiums, so this could be a real headache for Lugia players and Mew players, because you can Shadow Mist with Path against Lugia, you can Fan of Waves into Shadow Mist against DTE Mew, and they just can't do anything. They have to panic boss and hope that you can't do another Shadow Mist the next turn, so it gives you cheeky win cons into some powerful decks, and then you have Klefki slowing down other things, and you're kind of just big against Lost Box, I presume, is the idea. I feel like this could be slightly weak into Drapion plays, especially with Skyseal Stone, but I guess you're just trying to sit behind Key and Hat the whole game and just say, can't touch this, essentially, is the idea. So yeah, seems to do pretty good. It is playing Roxanne Judge as well, so as your opponent starts taking those knockouts, you can keep hand disrupting them, and you just have a great draw engine on your own side of the field, so actually kind of powerful, honestly. Possibly could have been a deck that we put in the tier list, but we just didn't know enough about the deck to know. This list plays a copy of Mawile. So Tempting Trap's actually kind of strong. It can be a way of stopping a Lugia player once again from playing the game, because you can bring up Luminion and they can no longer attack with Luminion, so you can just use this attack the whole game. You can do it against a couple other decks as well that don't play many switch cards, so it is low-key a win condition. which is kind of cheeky. Even if you just use this to slow things down, so that you can Underworld Door more often, is also just very valid. Just something to bear in mind. But yeah, this is something I need to profile soon, because I haven't done enough testing with it to know the every niche play about it, but I've seen enough to be like, yeah, this is actually pretty strong. DTMU still finding the way to do well. Nothing too surprising about this list. Just getting into the game, playing rope switch rather than cross switches, completely fine. Gives you a bit more space. And then we have a Lost Zone box from CDO. CDO is playing a Sky Seal build. This is a pretty cookie cutter list, honestly. Looks pretty well refined. Nothing too juicy about this one. It just seems to be a very good baseline list and did very well. So there you go. Let's move on to the second late night, the slightly later night. And again, we'll start with the metagame. So Lost Zone box did well. Lugia is substantially more popular. Then we have Guardi, Miraidon quite popular. Tina, Mew. Guardi Mewtwo really already doubling in its popularity from one late night to the next. Because I think this one starts during the first late night tournament. So if you start seeing Guardi Mewtwo doing well, people will just take it and roll with it. But it was once again a Lugia that won. So Lugia won the two biggest online tournaments so far. And again, this looks like a pretty solid build. It's actually playing Radiant Gardevoir rather than Serena. Radguardi can give you some upside into Arc Tina and Lost Tina, obviously. So that's kind of the upside there, the upshot of this over Serena, which is kind of more focused on Lost Box. But yeah, this looks pretty good to me. Regenerative also seems better than Lucky Energy. Lucky definitely is the lowest on my list of energy. I personally like Triple V-Guard, Triple Gift. And I'm not hugely high on Regenerative, but sometimes the high roll pays off and it's like, yeah, I got a free turn. Or it just makes the opponent play differently as well, I suppose. So it was another Guardi Mewtwo that got second. So Guardi Mewtwo really doing well. I think this is the same list that we've seen earlier with the one Klefki. But yeah, Guardi Mewtwo doing the business. Take out those candies and just trade more, forehead. Insane. We have another DT Mew. This one has the space for shoes. Kind of nice. I've seen that in and out of lists. Seems pretty good. See Lugia once again. I've seen a number of double stone as well. This is on the quad Great Ball. Oh, wow. So this one is playing no capturing aroma. Interesting. Saying, I don't trust that coin flip. I'll just rely on this coin flip down here. It's also playing 4 Urn. I haven't seen 4... Wait, this... Okay, wow. 4 Urn. That's wild. This one has no hand disruption either. Plays no judge. 4 Urn seems really, really high. I think 3 and an impact is immediately stronger, honestly. But hey-ho. We've got the Tina build. Once again, with the energy line that I'm not in agreement with. Looking pretty routine at this point. What are the builds? This is okay. Wow, interesting. So we have an all-one prize build of Lost Box, which I don't think we've even seen today. Even the Sky Seal stones that have been leaning into Zam haven't quite been fully in. This is a Kyogre combo build, though. I think I prefer 4/4 on the energy count because you're leaning into both Zam and Zacian. The reason why you would like Zacian in the deck is it gives you a way through Klefki and 1 energy attachment, similar to what I was saying with the Miltank earlier in the Charizard deck. Having a Zacian with just 1 attachment to get through Klefkis if you feel your board is completely fine. And it's just a 1 prize. It's just a 1 energy attacker anyway. You can use this in mirror situations as well, even because it's got 130 hit points, so it's quite annoying. If you're like bossing or if they've roped and given you Confe, you can punish those sorts of plays. So kind of nice as a one-off, honestly. I've had it on my radar. I definitely think if you're playing these two, though, you go 4/3/4. Because this is, you want to weave in the Zamazenta kind of early as well. I suppose you have the Snorlax as that sort of catch-all option if your energy aren't quite lining up properly. But yeah, there are definite strengths to being just all 1 prizey. And obviously Kyogre is still a big thing to work towards. I do like the idea of playing 1 Miriam in this sort of build, though. Because, especially if you're already playing double Recycler, having Miriam just to be an extra draw 3 option seems pretty valuable to me. I know it's not guaranteed like your next Sableye or whatever, but I do think that's decent. I suppose Clara's already a +2 if you just use your energy immediately on Greninja and then have your other energy in hand. So maybe that's just maybe it's a cold take from me. But yeah, looking pretty solid. I think Kyogre still has upsides for sure. Where have we got to? We have another Lugia doing well. Lots of these lists playing regenerative, but I've never once seen the value in the card. This is a pretty solid list though. Liking this one a lot. No collapsed, but otherwise pretty good. And then we have the Lost Goo as well. So we saw a pretty wild list last time. This one is much more similar to where I was at in my head with the Lost Goo. I personally think Melanie is like back in a big way in Goodra. I'm actually at 4 copies of Melanie in my current Goo because it gives you a turn 2 Rolling Iron option that doesn't rely on 7 in the Lost Zone for Mirage Gate. I just want to tempo roll people. I know from Twitter that Defiance Band was in here to try and help out against Miraidon, but it didn't really work as they had planned. So I feel like these can be spaces, even if they are just Choice Belts. I think that's still fine. Choice Belt can help you get through T-Tar, if they don't have V-Guard, I suppose. But it can also just allow you to Gust evolving V Pokemon, which I think there are a good amount of, that it's probably still okay in the list, honestly. But yeah, I'm fully entrenched in I want Melanie in my modern Goo, and I think modern Goo is just strong, honestly. So yeah, really nice to see this build, and very, very close to where I was at with Lost Goo and started testing with, so very cool. And then we have one more tournament. It has been a really long video. I've been really sinking my teeth into this, but I feel like it's very valuable this early on in the format to go deep into this. And we have a Guardy winning, what was this? 6-0 with a Bennett build. So Bennett EX, the Everlasting Darkness, is item lock and gives you a Poltergeist option, which can deal a chunk of damage all in one go. We haven't seen much of this before. It's even got Ace Arola's Premonition. I'm having to read cards. Okay. So it gives you information before you use, or choose not to use, your Bennett, I suppose. Item lock can be frustrating for a number of decks to deal with, in fairness. Can buy you some time to build up your combo. Like, slow down a Lost Box player from getting to 10 quickly, so then you evolve into all your guys, especially with the Gallade here as well. You're like, give me time, chill, let me evolve up, and then I'll start making comebacks later. I suppose is the defense mode option of this deck. This is only at 10 energy, though. I definitely think 11 is the lowest count you can possibly go with Guardy, because otherwise you can get stalled by going to 9 on some of your guys. It definitely limits a ton of your plays, and prizing becomes an even bigger issue. So I think 11 is your lowest possible count of Psych Energy. That's just a small thing that I'm like fully behind. But yeah, this is Bennett's Judge. Try and play the game now while I build in the back is kind of the idea. Kind of cool. Kind of cool. What else we got? Lugia continued to do well. This was also, what was this, 6-0 as well? Okay, nice. So this was just Swiss, I guess. Nothing too surprising about this one. Has, again, the high collapse count, has the dunce. So we have seen a decent amount of dunce pass. I think this has to be knee-jerk reacting to Skyseal Stone stuff. I can't foresee it being good enough in the Miraidon matchup, because Miraidon's already favoured. But yeah, we see a Fusion Mew. We haven't seen a Fusion Mew for a while. It's mostly been DTE stuff, but it is still out here. It can still do stuff. It still has a bit of defense mode with Path Judge and Roxanne. Very high on the Forest Seal count, but that's good for a combo build like this. Have Deoxys as an alternate one-prize attacker in one-prize matchups. Kind of cool. Another Lugia. Again, we're getting pretty... I've made my stance known on most of these lists at this point. We have a Zard build. Okay, so this is a Zard build that plays the Skyseal Stone package and Miltank and double Manaphy. It's actually a teammate of mine, and we've talked about the list quite a lot, so I'm very on board with this list. I think it's very, very good. And then we have a Lugia and 2 Mews to round things out. We'll just have a look. It's a DTE Mew and a DTE Mew. So yeah, there we go. This is the most recent one, so let's have a look at the metagame. So Lugia actually being most popular alongside Lost Box, level in popularity. Guardy, Miraidon, Tina, Mew. Urshi falling off a little bit. I do think that the rise in Lugia may have been in part because of Urshi Intel, because Lugia's really good into Urshi Intel. Like, this deck can't really capitalize on anything in the Lugia deck. The only thing you can do is double gun it down Archeops, and then Urshi through the Archeops. That's the best thing you can do in that matchup, but Lugia can also play healing as well with their Serena and make life more difficult for you, so yeah. So that's a breakdown of the decks so far. If we go to here, we can see the combined popularity. We can also look at win percentage. Lugia has a really high win percentage. So Lugia is the 5th most played deck and still has that high of a win percentage. That's absolutely insane. So yeah, Lugia still doing good. I really hope this is actually accurate to standard. I couldn't tell you. Maybe I'm on copium right now. It says it's standard and it's Scarlet Violet. Hopefully this is accurate. But yeah, Gudra also has a very high win rate, although a low sample size so far. Lost Box is above 50-50 at this popularity with this many mirrors. That's actually really high as well. Mew holding out pretty strong. And then we got some some questionable stuff down here. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Scarlet and Violet. Let me know your thoughts on Shadow Rider. Let me know your thoughts on Mewtwo build of Guardi. Was it the best build all along? Were we completely hoodwinked by the list that we've seen so far do well? Let me know your favourite Lost Box variant. How's Miraidon getting on for you guys? It still seems to be... Well, it's kind of falling in popularity a little bit, but I'm seeing it everywhere on the ladder. Maybe that's just PTCG Live things. I'll hear it all down below. Thanks so much for watching. If you are here, it's been over an hour of discussion, but hopefully that's a good primer for the EUIC. So I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.